When you suddenly pull away from a woman, whether it's going quiet after regular conversations or disappearing completely without explanation, it messes with her more than most men realize. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Disappearing often triggers more interest and obsession than being consistently available ever did. It sounds cold, maybe even manipulative, but it's not about playing games. It's about understanding how emotional momentum works. When a woman feels a growing connection and that energy gets cut off suddenly, her mind doesn't just move on. It starts trying to fill in the blanks. She starts thinking more, not less. She wonders if she did something wrong. She replays past conversations. She checks your social media. She doesn't always show it, but the silence starts echoing louder than any words ever did. You've gone from a man she could easily read to a question mark she can't figure out. And that shift? It pulls her in deeper. Now, to be clear, this isn't about disappearing to manipulate or punish someone. It's about what naturally happens when you go from constant presence to unexpected absence. Women respond to contrast. And when that contrast shows up out of nowhere, it hits hard. Most men think disappearing means she'll just forget about you or move on. That's not how it works, at least not right away. What really happens in her mind is way more complex, and it's what we're diving into in this video. Welcome to the channel. If you're trying to understand female psychology without the fluff or confusion, you're in the right place. Today, we're breaking down what's really going on in her head when you disappear, and why it often pulls her in harder than anything you said when you were around. Let's get into it. 1. Silence triggers obsession. When a man goes quiet all of a sudden, especially after steady attention or connection, it doesn't just go unnoticed. It sets off a chain reaction in a woman's mind. What's dangerous about that silence is how quickly it turns into overthinking. And that overthinking can spiral into obsession. It usually starts like this. You've been texting her daily, maybe seeing each other, flirting, building a vibe. Then out of nowhere, you stop reaching out. You go dark. No warning, no slow fade, just gone. At first, she might pretend not to care. She might even match your silence. But inside, her brain is now in overdrive. She's wondering, what happened? Did I say something wrong? Did he lose interest? Is he talking to someone else? The attention she used to give you casually now gets amplified because of the silence. She's not just thinking about you once in a while. She's thinking about you constantly, because there's no closure. The energy is unresolved, and that lack of resolution keeps her coming back mentally. It's not about love. It's not even always about you. It's about the sudden shift that broke the pattern. What used to feel stable now feels confusing, and confusion keeps people emotionally invested way longer than clarity ever does. Think of it like this. When she knew where she stood with you, her emotions were steady. But when you disappeared, her brain had to start filling in the blanks. That's where obsession starts. Not because she's crazy, but because the emotional rhythm got interrupted. Silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. The less you say, the more she fills in with thoughts. And because those thoughts are often based on fear, curiosity, or rejection, they don't go away quickly. They keep circling back, keeping her mentally tied to the situation. Even if she never texts you again, you're still in her head. And here's where most guys don't realize the power of what's happening. Your silence has now created more emotional weight than your words ever did. By disappearing without explanation, you've made her question her judgment, her value, and the connection itself. That doesn't mean you ghost women just to get in their heads. But it does mean that silence isn't neutral. It creates emotional movement, especially when things were warm before. It turns interest into tension, and tension into obsession. So when you disappear, whether intentionally or not, understand that your silence says something. It creates a vacuum, and most of the time, that vacuum pulls her in deeper. 2. She thinks you've moved on first. When you disappear, one of the first thoughts that crosses her mind is simple. He must have found someone else. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if you just got busy or decided to take a step back. In her world, your silence means you've emotionally checked out and possibly into someone else's world. This hits her pride first. It's not just about losing your attention. It's the idea that you gave it to someone else before she had a chance to decide how she felt about you. That makes her feel replaced. And for most women, especially the ones used to being the one who walks away, that hits different. Women are used to having options. They're used to guys sticking around, waiting, chasing, checking in. So when one of those options suddenly disappears, it sends a message that she's not the one in control. And the thought that you may have moved on first, before she was even done figuring you out, triggers insecurity, competition, and curiosity all at once. She doesn't want to feel like the one who got left behind. She doesn't want to be the one who was slower to decide. That flips the power dynamic in a way she's not used to. Instead of you being the one waiting around hoping for her attention, she starts wondering where you went and why you're no longer reacting to her like you used to. Here's where things get interesting. Even if she wasn't that emotionally attached to begin with, your disappearance creates a new problem for her to solve. Why did he pull away first? And that thought lingers. It lives in the back of her mind, sometimes long after she's moved on physically. That unanswered question creates mental friction, and that friction keeps you relevant. Whether or not you actually moved on doesn't matter. What matters is that she thinks you did. That alone changes the way she sees the whole situation. She starts remembering things you said, wondering if you were just faking interest, trying to figure out what signs she missed. That kind of mental loop is hard to ignore, and it keeps her connected to you, even if she never shows it. So when you disappear, you're doing more than going silent. You're unintentionally, or maybe intentionally, making her believe she wasn't your first choice. And no woman likes to feel like the one who got dropped first. That's what stings the most. Not the loss, but the fact that she didn't see it coming. And once that thought enters her head, it doesn't leave easily. Third, her ego takes the first hit. When a woman feels a man suddenly pull away or disappear, the first thing that reacts isn't her heart, it's her ego. Whether she was fully into you or still figuring things out, there's something about a man going silent that hits a nerve. It challenges the way she sees herself. Most women are used to being pursued, desired, and checked on. They're used to having attention come to them without having to work too hard for it. So when that pattern breaks, it doesn't just feel confusing, it feels personal. Her ego starts asking questions. Why isn't he reaching out? Why did he pull back? What does that say about me? Even if she didn't see you as a serious option, your distance now feels like rejection. And rejection stings, especially when it's unexpected. This is when she starts checking in with herself in a different way. She thinks about how much effort she put in, how she responded to you, and whether she might have come across as too cold or too casual. Not because she misses you deeply, but because her pride just took a hit. And here's where things shift. The attention she once took for granted now feels missing. And her ego doesn't like the idea that someone who was once giving her consistent energy is now treating her like she doesn't exist. That flips her internal narrative. Instead of being the one in control, now she's wondering what went wrong. This doesn't mean she suddenly falls for you, but it does mean your absence gets under her skin in a way presence never did. It makes her look at you differently, not necessarily with affection, but with curiosity and tension. That's enough to stir emotion. Men need to understand this. A woman doesn't have to love you to feel something when you disappear. You don't have to be her dream guy. You just have to be the guy who unexpectedly disrupted her rhythm. When you disappear, you challenge her sense of how desirable she believes she is. That's where the ego gets involved. The mistake most men make is thinking women only react emotionally to men they're deeply attached to. That's not true. Sometimes it's not about the man at all. It's about how the situation makes her feel about herself. Your silence doesn't just remove you from the equation, it shifts the spotlight onto her, and not in a flattering way. It makes her question her appeal, her control, and her ability to read people. That bruises the ego. And bruised egos often come with strong emotional reactions, even if they're hidden behind silence or pride. So while you might think you're just stepping away, what you've actually done is leave a dent in how she sees herself. And that lingers longer than most guys realize. 4. Uncertainty becomes her addiction. When a man disappears suddenly, he doesn't just leave silence, he leaves uncertainty. And as strange as it sounds, that uncertainty can become addictive. Here's why. The human brain hates unfinished stories. It wants resolution. It wants to make sense of things. And when something ends without warning, especially something that felt like it was building momentum, the mind doesn't just let it go. It loops. It overanalyzes. It creates meaning where there isn't any. For a woman, this kind of emotional cliffhanger can take over her mental space. She doesn't know where she stands. She doesn't know what your silence means. She's left with 100 unanswered questions and no real way to close the loop. That's when the obsession kicks in. Not because she's emotionally attached to you, but because she's emotionally stuck in the unknown. And here's where it gets tricky. That emotional friction, caused by the uncertainty, starts to feel familiar. It becomes part of her daily thought process. She checks her phone. She wonders if you'll show back up. She replays what was said between you. It creates a low-level tension that keeps her connected, even without contact. That tension becomes a kind of emotional habit. Now, this doesn't mean she likes being ignored. What it means is that the unpredictable nature of your silence creates just enough instability to keep her emotionally invested. And that instability has a weird way of keeping you relevant, even without saying a word. It's the same reason people stay hooked on toxic relationships. It's not always about love or compatibility. It's about the roller coaster, the ups and downs, the chase for clarity that never quite arrives. And when you disappear, you unknowingly create that same push and pull feeling in her mind. When she was sure of your attention, she may not have thought about you much. But now that you've pulled back, you've become a puzzle. And humans, by nature, hate unsolved puzzles. She might act cold. She might post things that look like she's unbothered. But behind that, her thoughts are still trying to solve what happened. The uncertainty keeps you alive in her mind. This is why disappearing creates such a strong emotional effect. It's not just the loss, it's the confusion around the loss. That confusion is what lingers. It's what keeps her energy circling back, trying to understand what went wrong or why things changed. Men often think silence equals disinterest on both sides. But that's not how female psychology works. Uncertainty doesn't make her forget you. It often makes her remember you more, because her mind is stuck trying to fill in the blanks you left behind. The less she knows, the more she thinks. And the more she thinks, the harder it is for her to fully move on, even if she tries to act like she already has. 5. She starts chasing for closure. When a man suddenly disappears, one of the first things a woman starts craving is closure. It's not just about missing the connection, it's about needing to understand why things ended the way they did. That need for clarity can be strong enough to pull her into a cycle where she starts chasing, not for attention or affection, but for answers. Most women don't like being left in the dark. When someone they've been connecting with suddenly goes quiet, their mind doesn't let it rest. It keeps circling back, trying to figure it out, and that confusion often turns into action. She might reach out to check in, casually respond to your stories, or send a message that seems innocent, but is really just testing the waters. There was a woman who had been texting with a guy almost every day. Things felt consistent, even playful. Then, over the course of a weekend, he just stopped replying. No argument, no red flags, just silence. At first, she brushed it off, but after a few days, she sent a quick message. Something like, "Hope all's good." When he didn't respond, she started scanning her past texts, wondering if she came on too strong or said something wrong. She wasn't chasing him because she missed him. She was chasing closure. That's how it usually starts. She wants to understand what changed. Not because she needs the relationship back, but because the silence made her feel out of control. Women are emotional processors. They want things to make sense. When something doesn't, they look for pieces to make the picture whole. And this is where a lot of guys misunderstand what's happening. They think if she reaches out after they go quiet, it means she's still into them. But in many cases, it's not about wanting the man back. It's about regaining a sense of emotional balance. Closure is her way of taking her power back. If you've ever had a woman text you days or weeks after going silent, asking how you've been, or saying she was just thinking about you, it might not be about starting something again. It might be her trying to close the door you left open. When people feel emotionally unfinished, they look for ways to settle that energy. That's what closure does. It ends the loop. But here's the part that matters most. If you were chasing her before, and now she's the one sending those messages, it's likely not about attraction. It's about resolution. She just wants to stop wondering. And once she gets closure, she can finally let go. So if you suddenly disappear and she starts reaching out, understand what she's really after. It's not always about you. It's about what the silence stirred up in her. She's chasing clarity, not connection. 6. She remembers what she overlooked. When you suddenly disappear, something interesting happens in her mind. She starts thinking about all the things she didn't fully notice before. Things she brushed off. Things she took for granted. Things she didn't pay much attention to when you were around. It's human nature. When something or someone is gone, our brain fills the empty space by replaying what was there. And for women, this often turns into a kind of mental rewind. She starts going back through your conversations, your vibe, your behavior, and reevaluating it all with fresh eyes. Here's why that matters. In the moment, when your presence is constant, most people don't look that closely. When you're always texting, always calling, always showing up, you become part of the background. It doesn't mean she doesn't like you. It just means your presence feels normal. It's expected. But when you disappear, you interrupt that pattern. You go from something consistent to something missing. And that gap forces her to reflect. She starts remembering little things you said that showed confidence. Times when you were funny without trying. How you handled yourself. The way you didn't seem to chase or overthink things early on. Even if she didn't fully appreciate it while it was happening, the silence brings it all back into focus. What she overlooked when you were there suddenly becomes more noticeable when you're not. And it's not just about missing attention. It's about realizing she might have undervalued something real, something stable, something attractive in a subtle way. That quiet confidence, that calm energy, the effort that didn't ask for anything in return. This doesn't guarantee she'll come back or reach out, but it does shift the way she remembers you. The key here is that silence gives her space to see what she couldn't before. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because your absence forces her to look again. And often, that second look is more honest than the first. Men often make the mistake of trying to remind women of their value while they're still in the picture. They over-explain, over-invest, and overdo it, hoping to be seen clearly. But the truth is, sometimes you get seen more clearly when you're gone than when you're standing right there. So if she's starting to think about you again, it's probably not just about what she's feeling in the moment. It's about what she missed while you were there, and now can't help but notice in your absence. That realization stays with her. 7. Your absence feels more powerful than presence. Sometimes, being around all the time does less for your impact than pulling away ever could. That's not about playing games. It's about understanding energy and value. When you're constantly available, constantly reaching out, constantly showing up, it's easy to get overlooked. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're too accessible. You don't give her a chance to miss you, to think about you, or to appreciate the space you take up when you're around. But when you disappear, when you create distance, when you stop pouring in effort that isn't being matched, suddenly the energy shifts. Now she has to sit with the absence. Now she notices the difference. And sometimes, that absence hits harder than anything you could have said or done when you were showing up every day. Why? Because your presence was expected. But your absence? That leaves an impression. This is where a lot of men need to wake up. If you've been giving too much, showing up too often, chasing too hard, and not seeing any return, it's time to pull back. Not out of bitterness, not to manipulate her, but to reset the balance. Let your absence speak. Let her notice the energy that's no longer there. And here's some honest advice. If she doesn't notice, if she doesn't care, that tells you everything you need to know. You were never truly valued. You were tolerated. You were convenient. And that's not a role you should ever play. Your job as a man isn't to convince someone to see your worth. It's to show it once, and then let your behavior, your boundaries, and your distance do the rest. Women are drawn to men who respect themselves, who don't stay where they're overlooked, who know when to pull their energy back and reinvest it in themselves. Don't confuse presence with power. Being there all the time doesn't make you stronger. It makes you easier to take for granted. Real power comes from being grounded enough to walk away when something isn't serving you. So ask yourself, are you always available because you think that's what will win her over? Or are you willing to step away and let her feel what it's like without you? Because when a man can leave without drama, without begging, without explanation, that silence says everything. And if she's paying attention, she'll feel it. If she doesn't, that silence saved you more time than her attention ever would have. Disappearing without warning doesn't just remove you from her life. It forces her to feel your absence in ways your presence never could. It flips the script, whether you intended to or not. And what's more revealing is what happens after you disappear. How she reacts, what thoughts take over, and whether she even reaches back at all. Here's something to think about. Sometimes, the moment you stop showing up is the first time she actually sees you. That's the power of pulling away. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to protect your value. You don't chase what doesn't chase you back. You let your absence highlight what your presence couldn't. Now, this doesn't mean you should ghost people or play silent games just to get reactions. It means you need to be intentional about your energy. Give it where it's matched. And when it's not, be willing to step away without guilt. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever disappeared from a woman's life and seen her come back stronger, or not at all? Did it reveal something about the connection that you didn't notice before? Drop your experiences in the comments. I read through them, and I'll be replying. This channel is a space for real conversations, and your story might help another man see things more clearly. I appreciate you being here. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and always move with intention.